Thunder rolled across the sky, loud and restless as the storm swirled over the village. The air felt thick, charged with a strange energy that seemed to hum in the ears of those brave enough to venture outside. A group of boys stood near the edge of the sacred grove, their laughter nervous and uneven. One boy stepped forward, a determined glint in his eyes. "Are you scared already?" "It's just a hut," he said, glancing back at the others. They shuffled uneasily, avoiding his gaze. Another voice, softer but laced with hesitation, rose above the sound of the wind. "It's forbidden. You know the elders will—" "Will what?" came the retort, sharp and cutting. "Tell us stories to keep. Us afraid? Don't you want to know what's inside?" The others muttered among themselves, their voices carried away by the rising wind. No one moved, but their unease was plain. "Fine," the boy said, taking a bold step toward the hut. "Stay here and watch." The hut stood quiet and ominous, its entrance shrouded by woven mats that swayed as if alive. As he approached, the whispers from the group faded, replaced by the sound of the storm pressing closer. The mat parted with a single deliberate motion. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the scent of earth and time. The boy's eyes adjusted, slowly, revealing shelves lined with carvings and jars. At the center of the room sat a calabash, its surface gleaming faintly as though it held a light of its own. His breath caught. So this is what they've been hiding. His hand reached out, slow and cautious, as if drawn by an unseen force. The calabash grew brighter, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Then it spoke. "You are not ready for this." The voice was deep, resonant, and filled with an authority that sent a shiver down his spine. His hand froze, hovering above the vessel. His instinct screamed at him to run, but his curiosity rooted him in place. The light flickered, and the voice grew louder. "Leave now, before it is too late." A crack of thunder startled him. His hand knocked against the calabash, and it tumbled to the ground with a dull thud. The faint glow dimmed, but not before a thin, jagged line appeared along its surface. Panic surged through him. He snatched the calabash from the ground, placed it back on its stand, and stumbled toward the door. Outside, the wind howled. It carried voices, soft at first, then louder, calling his name. The boy broke into a run, his feet barely touching the ground as he tore through the grove, the whispers chasing him all the way. When he reached the group, his face was pale, and his breath came in sharp bursts. The others stared at him, waiting for an explanation, but he pushed past them without a word. The storm raged through the night, but his mind was louder. He lay in bed, eyes wide, replaying the calabash's warning over and over. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were faint now, distant but insistent, scratching at the edges of his mind. Morning brought no comfort. The village stirred to unsettling changes. The river, once swift and clear, now moved sluggishly, its surface murky and dull. Crops in the fields hung limp, their leaves curling at the edges as if in silent protest. Shadows in the grove danced, unnaturally, their movements disconnected from the wind. The villagers gathered in uneasy clusters, their voices low but urgent. "What have the spirits done?" one asked. "Something is wrong," another said. "The ancestors must be angry." The elders convened in the shrine, their faces grave as they spoke in hushed tones. One elder gestured toward the grove, where the sacred hut stood hidden among the trees. Another nodded, their voice barely audible above the murmurs. The calabash. It must be tended to. A runner was summoned, a lithe figure who disappeared into the forest path with swift, practiced steps. The destination was clear. The oracle must be consulted. The villagers watched the runner vanish, their silence heavy with fear. The boy stayed away from the crowd, his guilt a weight he couldn't shake. He knew the truth but couldn't bring himself to speak. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They called to him, weaving through his thoughts like threads he couldn't untangle. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely more than a breath. But the calabash didn't answer. Not yet. The elders walked with quiet dignity, each carrying a sacred calabash adorned with intricate carvings and beads. These vessels, they said, held the spirits of their ancestors, guardians of the village's balance. No one dared touch the calabashes without permission. To do so was to invite the ancestors' wrath, or so the stories claimed. In the bustling market, laughter mingled with the vibrant hum of bartering voices. A woman held out a basket of yams, while a group of children ran past, their laughter spilling into the warm air. Traders called out to each other, exchanging goods and stories. Drummers played lively rhythms as villagers sang along, their voices rising like the smoke from cooking fires. At dusk, the village gathered around the fires. An elder, his face lined with wisdom, leaned forward, his voice low and steady. In the days of old, when the earth was thirsty and the people hungered, Nyamekia appeared, he began. The children edged closer, their eyes wide. A pact was made to save the village, but it came with a price that cannot be forgotten. The next day, the elders stood in the sacred grove, their voices rising and falling in chants. They poured libations onto the ground, speaking words too ancient for the younger ones to understand. The calabashes in their hands glowed faintly, as though the spirits within were listening. Away from the grove, a boy stood by the river, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Trouble seemed to follow him wherever he went. He once convinced the children to climb the tallest tree, only to be scolded when they were found. He always had a question ready, each one pushing against the boundaries of what was acceptable. "Why can't we touch the calabashes?" he asked one day, his tone curious but persistent. An older woman frowned, her voice sharp. "The calabashes hold the spirits. They are not for playing." His curiosity only deepened. He wanted to know what secrets the elders kept. His questions grew bolder. "What do the spirits do? Why do the elders talk to them?" The boy's friend shook his head, cautious and uneasy. "You shouldn't ask things like that. They'll get angry." But he didn't listen. His boldness made him admired by some and scolded by others. The livestock began falling ill without reason. The sacred trees in the grove cracked as if under a great weight. Whispers of unrest spread through the village. The elders exchanged tense glances, their calm demeanor slipping. "The spirits are restless," one murmured. Another nodded gravely. Something has disturbed the balance. The villagers gathered in worried clusters. "Could it be a curse?" one asked. "Have the ancestors turned against us?" Unseen by the crowd, the boy crouched behind a hut, his ears straining to catch the elders' low voices. They spoke of Nyamekia, the name unfamiliar yet heavy with meaning. His heart raced. He had to know more. At home, he turned to the older woman who raised him. She sat quietly, her hands working on a basket, but her silence spoke volumes. "What is Nyameki?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her hands stilled. "That name is not for you to say," she replied, her tone firm. "But why? What is it?" She stood, avoiding his gaze. "Enough questions. Some truths are not meant for children." Her sudden silence only fueled his determination. He couldn't shake the feeling that the calabashes, the spirits, and Nyamekia were all connected. The questions burned inside him, growing louder with each passing day. He knew what he had to do. Rules or no rules, he needed answers, and he would find them, no matter the cost. Shadows flickered along the walls, stretching and shifting in ways they shouldn't. They moved with a life of their own, separate from the rhythm of the wind or the light of the moon. Eyes darted toward them, but they melted into stillness as if mocking anyone bold enough to look too long. The whispers began. Soon after, low at first, they wound through the quiet like snakes through tall grass. The boy froze, his name hissing through the air. He spun around, his breath quick and shallow, but no one was there. Only the cracked calabash sat on the ground, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "You are not safe." The voice was sharper now, cutting through the silence like a blade. The boy stepped back, his heart pounding. More words followed, disjointed but clear. A pact, betrayal, blood. The calabash's glow flickered with each word, its warning heavy with meaning he couldn't yet understand. He stared at it, trembling. The whispers ceased, leaving only the pounding of his heart. The boy's gaze shifted toward the older woman who had always spoken of tradition and balance. He thought of her silence, the way her hands had stilled when he had asked about Nyamekya. The weight of suspicion grew. Could his family hold a piece of this secret? He approached her again, demanding answers. Her expression hardened, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. She said nothing, turning away. The silence was all the confirmation he needed. Determined, he sought out his cautious friend. His urgency was met with hesitation. "This is dangerous," the other said, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter," came the reply, firm and unyielding. "We need to know." Reluctantly, the friend agreed, and together they moved toward the forbidden grove. The night pressed heavy around them as they crept through the shadows. The air seemed alive, whispering warnings that went unheeded. The sacred grove stood before them, a place of mystery and reverence. They slipped past the elders' symbols, their hearts pounding with each step. At the center, ancient carvings stood tall, etched into stone. Fingers traced the lines, uncovering the story of a village on the brink of ruin. Crops withered, rivers dried, and desperation led the elders to summon Nyamekyi. The spirit promised protection but demanded secrecy and obedience in return. The boys exchanged looks, their unease growing. The carvings told of balance maintained but at great cost. "What have we done?" one of them whispered, the gravity of the pact pressing down on them. Before they could fully comprehend, the grove itself seemed to awaken. The air shifted, and the faint sound of laughter echoed around them. It was light and playful, but it carried an edge that made their skin crawl. Nyamekyi's presence began to make itself known. Fires flickered out, only to spark back to life in strange colors. Objects moved without reason, and voices mimicked their own, calling to them from unseen corners. The tricks grew darker. A branch fell inches from them, crashing to the ground, with a force that shook the earth. Apparitions appeared in the shadows, their faces distorted and unrecognizable. Fear drove one boy back to the woman who had always held the truth. "Tell me," he demanded, his voice breaking. She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Our family, we have a part in this, but some truths are not mine to give." Her words left more questions than answers. The elders began to notice. Their watchful eyes followed the boy wherever he went. Whispers spread, suspicion growing. "He knows something," they muttered among themselves. That night, his dreams were unlike any he'd ever known. A figure appeared, shifting between shapes, a child, an elder, a shadow. Its voice was playful, dripping with mischief. "You've been searching for answers," it said, its tone mocking. "I can give them to you." The boy's heart raced, but he didn't speak. "Fix the calabash," the figure continued, its grin widening. "Restore balance. But first, expose the lies. The elders' secrets must come to light." The offer was tempting, too tempting. "What's the cost?" he asked finally, his voice steady. The figure laughed. "Only the truth they've hidden. Break their pact, and all will be well." The boy woke with a start, the words echoing in his mind. He paced, torn between curiosity and loyalty. He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth came with a price too high to pay. The whispers from the calabash grew louder, more insistent. "The truth lies in their calabashes." The boy stood still, the weight of the words pressing heavily on his shoulders. He now understood the path ahead, but feared where it would lead. The boy stood firm, his eyes blazing with determination, but his companion stepped back, shaking his head. "This is too dangerous. We shouldn't be here." The response was sharp, cutting through the heavy air. "You're afraid? We've come too far to stop now." A pause followed, tension crackling like the distant thunder. The other hesitated, his gaze shifting between the shadows and the boys. "Defiant stance. This isn't about fear," came the reply, quiet but firm. It's about respect. The elders, they have reasons for their rules. The boy's frustration flared. Their reasons are secrets, secrets that have brought us here. The divide between them grew wider, their bond strained under the weight of their differences. Later, in a quieter moment, the hesitant one spoke again, this time with a voice tinged with vulnerability. You don't understand. My family, we've suffered because of the elders' decisions. The boy's expression softened, curiosity replacing frustration. What do you mean? A story unfolded. A family pushed to the edge, caught between the will of the spirits and the rules of tradition. The boy listened, his resolve tempered by a newfound understanding of his friend's caution. Still, the pull of loyalty proved stronger than fear. Despite his lingering dread, the other finally agreed. I'll help you, but only because I can't let you do this alone. The older woman's voice carried an edge as she spoke. There are things you don't understand, things you may never understand. Her words hung in the air, heavy with warning, but the boy pressed on. Then explain it to me. Tell me why. No one will speak of Niamakye. She turned away, her movements slower now, burdened by memories. You ask for truths you aren't ready to carry. The boy's persistence finally broke through. Her voice lowered, trembling under the weight of regret. I was young once, like you. Foolish. I broke the rules, thinking I knew better. She spoke of a mistake, a defiance of tradition that brought chaos to the village. Her actions, though, well-intentioned, had forced the elders to make the pact. Sometimes, she said, her voice soft but firm, the weight of leadership is heavier than anyone knows. Protecting the village comes at a cost, one you may never fully see. For the first time, the boy saw her as more than an elder. She was someone who had struggled, someone who had carried burdens no one else could. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her tone gentler now. Be careful where your questions lead. The answers aren't always what you hope for. The villagers' whispers grew louder with each passing day. Fear turned to anger, and anger turned to blame. They've failed us, one muttered. The ancestors are angry because the elders have grown weak, another said, their voice sharp. The once unified village began to fracture. Neighbors argued over what should be done. At night, the unrest grew. Fires, strong moments before, extinguished themselves without reason. Strange symbols appeared in the sacred grove, carved as if by unseen hands. The elders remained silent, their secrecy feeding the villagers' mistrust. Why won't they speak? Someone demanded. Amid the chaos, the boy listened. He heard the villagers' words, their accusations, their fears. He couldn't shake the feeling that some of it was meant for him. In the quiet of his thoughts, the boy wrestled with the question he couldn't escape. Am I to blame for this? The memory of the cracked calabash haunted him, its jagged line a constant reminder of what he had done. The whispers from the calabash replayed in his mind, their warnings sharp and cryptic. The elder's silence left him uncertain. Could he trust the whispers, or were they leading him astray? His doubt lingered, but something stronger began to take hold. The village was unraveling, and he couldn't stand by and watch. I'll find the truth, he resolved, his voice steady, even if no one else will. But as he walked forward, the weight of his choice pressed heavily on his shoulders. The path was his alone now, each step carrying him closer to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The grove buzzed with tension. The air was thick and restless, charged with energy that pressed against their skin. Every step felt heavier, the ground beneath them alive with unseen whispers. The three moved closer to the center, their hearts pounding like distant drums. A faint light flickered ahead, playful and curious. Fireflies swirled, their glow casting strange shapes on the trees. But as they drew near, the fireflies twisted, their tiny lights stretching and darkening until they became shadowy figures. The shadows loomed tall, their forms bending unnaturally. Laughter echoed through the air, sharp and mocking. So, you've come, the voice said, smooth as silk but cold as stone. The trickster spirit appeared, shifting shapes with every heartbeat. First, it was a child, then an elder, then something, monstrous and unrecognizable. "You've broken the pact," it hissed, "and now the balance is broken." A pause followed, the silence louder than any sound. "Do you know why this grove holds such power?" the spirit asked. It didn't. Wait for an answer. "Your ancestor was the first to step forward. A sacrifice to save the rest. Their life for your village." The words struck like a blow. "Without that sacrifice, you would all have perished. Now you threaten to undo everything they gave." The spirit's form shifted again, its voice sharper. "The price must be paid. One life for the many. Offer it, or watch your village crumble." The wind surged suddenly, carrying the spirit's laughter as it swirled around them. Shadows danced wildly, and the grove seemed to close in. Ancestral figures appeared in the corners of their vision, their eyes hollow and accusing. The ground trembled, and a storm raged overhead, its fury matching the spirit's wrath. Through the chaos, a voice rose, clear, steady, and filled with resolve. "We will not give another life." The trickster laughed, louder this time. "And yet, the balance must be restored. What will you offer then?" The answer came not with words, but with action. The boy reached into his memory, piecing together the cryptic hints the calabash had whispered to him. He turned to the carvings they had discovered in the grove, studying the ancient symbols. "This is how we trap it," he said, his voice steady. The older woman nodded, her face grave but determined. She began to chant, her words flowing like water over stone. The symbols glowed faintly, their power stirring as the chant grew louder, but hesitation crept in. The other boy stepped back, his voice shaking. "What if this makes it worse? What if it escapes and takes everything?" The reply was firm, cutting through the doubt like a blade. "We have no choice. We have to try." The chant rose, and the elders joined in. Their voices wove together, filling the grove with an ancient melody. The spirit snarled, its form growing larger, its shadows lashing out in anger. It turned its attention to the boy, its voice low and cunning. "You're brave, like your ancestor, but are you ready to lose what they lost?" The spirit shifted again, taking the shape of someone familiar. The boy's breath caught. It was his lost ancestor, their face filled with sadness. "Why do you fight this? Let it end." For a moment, the boy faltered. Doubt gripped him, but the chant around him reminded him of his purpose. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the illusion. "You're not real, you're a trick." The spirit screamed, its form shattering like glass. The chant reached its peak, and the boy placed the newly crafted calabash in the center of the grove. The symbols glowed brighter, their light blinding as they pulled the spirit inward. With a final roar, the trickster was sealed. The grove fell silent, the storm fading to nothing. The air felt lighter, the balance restored. The elders stepped forward, their faces filled with a mix of relief and awe. The boy stood quietly, the calabash in his hands glowing faintly, as if it held the whispers of the past. Balance had been returned, but its weight would forever rest with those who carried its secret. The sacred calabashes hummed softly, their glow steady and warm. The air in the village felt lighter, free from the tension that had pressed on it for so long. Whispers of calm winds brushed through the trees, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. In the fields, the crops stood tall again, their leaves stretching toward the sun as though grateful. The elders stood together, their eyes turned toward the grove. The shadows no longer danced unnaturally. They stood still, watching over the village in silent approval. It was as if the ancestors themselves were acknowledging that harmony had returned. The villagers gathered in the center, their murmurs filled with relief and wonder. One of the elders stepped forward, their voice clear and steady. "For generations, we have kept the story of the pact hidden, believing it was best left in silence. But silence has its dangers. Today we will speak so that the truth is never forgotten." They spoke of the pact, of the choices made in desperation, and of the price paid to protect the village. The words carried the weight of responsibility, ensuring that no one would forget the balance the calabashes held. Eyes turned toward the boy who had faced the spirit. Gratitude shone in their expressions, but his own was quiet, thoughtful. While the village celebrated his courage, he felt the weight of a new burden. The calabash in his care glowed faintly, a constant reminder of the power it held and the secrets it carried. That evening, the villagers came together in gratitude. Songs filled the air and the fires burned brightly, casting warmth across the faces of those who had endured so much. The boy and the older woman were honored, their bravery at the heart of every story told. Later, in the quiet of the night, the boy sat with his friend. The tension that had once strained their bond had melted away, replaced with a deeper understanding. "I should have listened sooner," said one. "And I should have explained better," replied the other. The laughter that followed was light, free of the weight they had carried for so long. Their friendship, tested by shadows and storms, now felt stronger than ever. In the stillness of her home, the older woman placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Her voice was soft but firm. "You've done well, but this is only the beginning. Protecting the balance is a lifelong burden. Do you understand?" He nodded, his expression steady. "I'll do what's needed." She smiled, her pride clear. "Then you're ready." The calabash in his hands glowed warmly, its light soft and reassuring. It was as if the spirits themselves were offering their quiet blessing. As dawn broke, the village woke to a new day. The sun bathed the land in golden light, and the songs of birds filled the air. The boy stood at the edge of the grove, the calabash in his hands, watching as the first rays of sunlight touched the kya, sacred ground. The balance had been restored, and the village thrived. But the lessons learned would linger, shaping the hearts and minds of the people. The elders, the children, and even the spirits knew that this was a beginning, a chance to protect the harmony they had fought so hard to reclaim. The boy turned toward the village, the calabash glowing faintly in his hands. He walked forward, ready to carry the legacy of those who had come before him. The ancestors watched quietly, their presence a gentle reminder that their strength was never far. The firelight danced, casting long, flickering shadows that moved across eager faces. The children gathered close, their eyes bright with anticipation. The older woman sat before them, her voice calm but powerful, each word pulling them into the story she was about to tell. "There was once a boy," she began, her tone rich with wisdom. "A boy whose curiosity burned brighter than any fire. He asked questions that others were too afraid to ask. He searched for answers in places no one dared to go." The children leaned closer, their breaths held. "This boy discovered something. Hidden," she continued, "a truth guarded for generations. But his curiosity, as bold as it was, carried danger. He cracked what was meant to stay whole, and because of that crack, shadows began to creep into the village. Whispers grew louder. The balance wavered." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The children shifted, their imaginations, painting the scene in their minds. "Curiosity can be a gift," she said, her voice softer now, "but only when guided by wisdom." This boy learned that lesson. He faced a spirit, a trickster who played on fear and doubt. The boy stood firm even when it tried to trick him with the faces of those he loved. Her tone grew stronger. He didn't run. He didn't break. And because of his courage, the balance was restored. But that balance came with a price he now carries. The children sat wide-eyed, their silence filled with awe. One finally whispered, "What happened to the boy?" The older woman smiled gently. "He became the keeper of a great secret. The calabash he cracked now rests in his hands, its glow a reminder of the strength it takes to protect what matters most. It is not just a vessel, it is a symbol of wisdom, of responsibility, of unity." Her eyes swept over them, her voice ringing with clarity. "You must remember this. The calabashes protect us, but they do so only if we honor their lessons. Every choice has a cost. Every action carries a weight." The children nodded, their faces serious as they absorbed her words. The fire crackled softly, and the night seemed to hold its breath. listening to the wisdom passed down. At the riverbank, the boy sat alone, the calabash resting in his hands. Its glow was faint but steady, a soft light that reflected on the water's surface. He gazed at it, his mind filled with the echoes of the older woman's story. The whispers had stopped, but their memory lingered. The weight of what he had learned pressed on him, heavy but not unbearable. He traced the edge of the repaired crack with his fingers, feeling its jagged path. Her words came back to him. Every choice has a cost. He understood now. The cost was the responsibility he carried, the knowledge that the balance of the EI village depended on those who were willing to stand firm. He looked at the water, watching its quiet ripples. The glow of the calabash seemed to grow warmer, as though it acknowledged his reflection. The thoughts came clearly to him. Unity was what held the village together. Courage was what kept the shadows at bay. The boy knew that the lessons he had learned were not just for him, but for everyone. As the first light of dawn stretched across the sky, he stood. The calabash rested in his hands, its glow matching the rising sun. The village stirred in the distance, its future resting on the strength of those who understood the balance between curiosity and wisdom. The voice of the older woman echoed in his mind, steady and timeless. Every secret holds a price, but the courage to face the truth can bring even the most divided hearts together. With the calabash in his hands and the wisdom of the ancestors in his heart, he walked forward, ready for the path ahead. The village thrived, united by the lessons of the past and the hope for the future.